So, Berto, the psychology of Elon Musk.
Yay!
My goodness. When the patrons asked us to do this and we started looking into it, researching for it, I thought, well, there's probably not that much to talk about.
1 or 2 episodes.
There's so much to talk about. There's always so much to talk about.
Yeah.
This guy, every day, I was telling Stacy, legitimately, you could say that every couple weeks for the past at least 10 years, maybe longer, he has had a major event that any other super famous person might only have 1 or 2 of those events in their entire life.
Right.
And he has them all the time. I'm not saying good or bad. I'm just saying...
he works like 240 hours a week, so you got to figure he's going to run into a lot of situations like that.
Yeah. Just the newsworthiness of it and the amount of data available to us to speculate about the psychology of Elon Musk. So in preparation for this episode, I have reviewed a lot of data. There's a lot of data out there. I didn't realize that there would be that much.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of interviews with Elon himself. And in the more recent years, he has been increasingly disclosing about his childhood, about the way that he thinks, about how he approaches life. We could take some of it with a grain of salt, maybe, because he might be just trying to manage his image. But it's possible that a lot of it is fairly accurate. Also, a lot of what he has reported is corroborated by interviews and books by his family members, his coworkers, his former spouses. There are also interviews with his children, most notably one that we'll talk about in a future chapter. There are several documentaries and articles and biographies. I've read some of the main biographies. There's just so much to get into. And of course, he tweets about 1,000 times a day. And that says something in terms of what, not only that he's tweeting all the time, but also what he's talking about. There's just so much to talk about, so many details. Every day, there seems to be another massively controversial tweet, a new interview that everyone's talking about, a new lawsuit, a new partner, a new child, a family member talks about him, or a new advancement in technology at Tesla, at SpaceX, Starlink, his AI research, his brain interfaces, the tunnel stuff, the flamethrowers. But I will tell you, Berto, that in all the documentaries and all the books and all the online analyses, everyone seems to be overlooking one obvious detail that could explain a lot about his psychology. Yeah. I mean, it makes me wonder if I am not thinking right, if I'm wrong-headed about this, because I don't understand why people aren't at least raising it as a possibility, right? And I think it could explain a lot, particularly some more bizarre details about his behavior. And I want to present that in a later chapter, and I can't wait to get into it. So, Berto, who is Elon Musk in a nutshell? Tell me.
To me, Elon Musk is someone that when I first came across the name and whatnot, I was totally impressed. I was thinking, oh my gosh, what a genius. This guy, it looks like he's invented an electric car. He's figured out how to make it work and make it the fastest car on earth. And he's going to sell them for so cheap. He wants to save the environment, save the world. And he also shares a lot of the same ideology I have of the future of AI and how we could benefit from that and then go colonize other planets and stuff. Wow, this guy's really, really Tony Stark plus, like Tony Stark on acid. That was, I think, not an uncommon perspective 10 years ago. That's about all I had to go on. I knew a couple people that had Teslas, and I had seen them, and I was like, whoa, those things are crazy. I think it was during the pandemic, or a bit before the pandemic, or right during the pandemic, where I started learning a lot more and started slowly shifting my perspective dramatically to realizing that what I think of him now is that he is a very, very effective con artist. You can't deny the billions. He's really good at getting money, and that he does have vision for a future. And a lot of the things that he says, I still say like, yeah, this aligns with what I would say about the future of computers and some of his fears that he's espoused, contradictorily to his investments and things like that. So I would say that perspective shift was akin to realizing that there's no Santa Claus.
Yeah, well, I guess since you've come out of the gate with your opinion about him as being a con artist, I will state for the record at this point that if we have three options, we have I love the guy, and we have I hate the guy, and in the middle we have being agnostic about him. I would choose I'm agnostic about him. Yeah. I think that there are criticisms for sure, but I think there are some potential positives as well, and there's also just a lot of unknowns to me. Maybe by the end of this series of episodes, chapters in this deep dive, I will refine that opinion. Often, as I'm working on my notes and researching, I haven't really fully digested it all. So, who is Elon Musk? Well, what I would say in a nutshell is that he works in business, and as a part of that, he invests in companies, and he also arguably is an engineer. Some people would say he's not an engineer, other people would say he is, but he definitely seems to know more about the nuts and bolts and the science of his products than the typical CEO would, you know what I mean? He's known for PayPal, Tesla, SpaceX, Twitter, the Boring Company, they make tunnels, with Starlink. His company, Starlink, has more than doubled the number of satellites orbiting the Earth. Did you know that?
Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah. Like just in a few years, he more than doubled the satellites. Now they're little satellites, but still.
Yeah.
He is associated with Solar City, which is a huge solar company. He's also known for Neuralink, which is a company working on brain-computer interfaces, among other businesses and other ventures and other interests.
This always puzzles me, because if I were a billionaire, I'd be the same. I'd have all these companies, right? Like I'd have a thing about neural implants, cryogenics, certainly AI, robotics, all of it, right? Why do more billionaires not have all these? Why is it just him? It's bizarre. The possible future definitely involves understanding the brain and AI and robotics, and I suppose space travel potentially, for at least for the AI. So like if you've connected those dots and you have the money, why wouldn't you have all those investments? That's why I'm shocked there's only one billionaire connecting the dots. Maybe Richard Branson sort of, but in a different way. But
well,
yeah.
My very limited understanding of this sort of high-level investment is that there are much more sure ways to get a return on your investment than these kinds of businesses that are highly speculative in nature and are in all likelihood not going to work out in the end, which
totally
many of these businesses were on the brink of going bankrupt early on anyway. You know, investing in real estate or in microchips.
Totally. No, I get how that's not how they made their billions. I just wonder now that they have their billions, why they're not putting them in that.
Yeah. Well, what I thought you were saying, which I would agree with, is that it's strange that more billionaires aren't trying to benefit humanity with their money. You know what I mean?
Oh, no, I do think, well, yeah, I mean, Bill Gates, unless you hate him or whatever, but I think he tries to help humanity.
Absolutely. There are some, Warren Buffett, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But
I think I was not going for the help humanity angle. I was going for the how do we live forever angle. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, all right. Well, let's take a break, and when we get back, let's watch a bit of video from a PBS documentary on Elon Musk. What do you say?
Let's do it.
All right, we're back from the break. So let's watch a little snippet from a PBS documentary from 2021.
Tell me one other person that has reinvented space travel, created the first all-electric car company, figured out transportation underground, put satellites in the air, providing the internet to everybody, solar panels on the roof. Who's done all this?
Well, actually, this is kind of the point I was making, because you certainly can't say that all the things they just listed are money-making. That's not how he made his billions. You know, Tesla, yes, that is how he made his billions. But as we might talk later, like through a ton of lies. But either way, I think what he's saying is definitely, I share that perspective. It's like, oddly, you cannot point to many others or almost any others that have their fingers in all these what I consider related and important pies, which are space travel, robotics, AI, and neurology or neurobiology. But that doesn't mean that all those things make money or that they're good investments or that he's made them all successful or anything like that. It just means that his interests do have this common thread. So, from that perspective. Now, as far as like what they listed, well, the Boring Company actually hasn't produced what they wanted to do. There's some that argue that he was doing that to like offset the initiatives in California to do mass transit because that would affect people buying cars, and he has a car company. There's a million perspectives on that. But I do think that some of the things he's got have the potential, like obviously SpaceX, he's got sort of a monopoly right now on space and that could be very lucrative, even if just from government contracts. Like they just beat out Boeing for trying to save the people that are stuck in space. So, I think a lot of the investments he's made, he hasn't invented this technology, right? But a lot of the investments he's made many of them could be very, very lucrative. And one of them has already been very lucrative.
He completely disrupted Boeing, Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, Russia. Just completely upended their entire businesses. No one was sitting around inviting him in. He had to sort of be a bull in the china shop.
Has he brought a rock and roll swagger to the business world?
One thing that I think is appealing to a lot of people that he does is that he flouts convention entirely. He grabs convention and throws it out the window and shits on it, right? He's like, oh, well, you can't just like buy Twitter. So, oh yeah, I'll buy Twitter. Or you can't just like, sell a sports car like that's electric. I'll sell a sports. Like these things appeal to people. It's like, oh, he's just breaking all the rules. You can't buy a space company and send satellites and all the things he does. There is a contingent of people, which I used to count myself among, that are like, oh wow, he just doesn't care, man. He's just like, if you show him a stop sign, he'll, race a Tesla through it.
All right, let's take a break. When we get back, more stuff on Elon Musk, of course.
Let's do it.
All right, back from the break. So, getting back to my notes here, we just stretched, so I'm a little out of breath. So he's a business person, and he's associated with all these very successful and some not successful companies, but definitely companies that have a product that a lot of people would think are pretty cool products. If he just was associated with one of these companies, I think he would be seen as a very interesting person. The second thing that we can say about him is he is the richest human on the planet. Yeah. As of today, Forbes estimates his net worth to be $241 billion. That is more than the GDP of most countries in the world, by the way.
Yeah.
Countries like Peru, Greece, Kuwait, Ukraine. That's just incredible.
Now, you can't technically access that, right? Because most of that's Tesla. But still,
totally. Yeah.
Yeah. His technical worth is ridiculous.
Yeah. Who are the second, third, and fourth most richest people in the world? Do you know?
I don't know the exact order. I know Warren Buffett is up there. He's in the top 5 for sure. He used to be number 1, trading back and forth with Gates.
According to this Forbes list, he is, I think, number 6.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, poor Buffett. Bill Gates is probably still in the top 5.
He is number 8.
What? Okay, so what has happened? I guess
everyone in the world.
Jeff Bezos.
He's number 2.
Yeah, I don't know who else.
Zuckerberg.
Oh, he's up there already.
He's number 3.
Wow.
Yeah. And then we got the Bernard Arnault and family in France. Number 5 is Larry Ellison from Oracle.
He's still number 5?
Yeah. 6, Warren Buffett. 7, Larry Page from Google. Bill Gates. Sergey Brin.
Yeah, he's the other Google founder.
From Google. And then the last one is Steve Ballmer, Microsoft.
Oh, yeah.
Also, people see him as a super genius, like a Tony Stark, like you were talking about before. Let's watch a clip from the Stephen Colbert late show with Stephen Colbert. This is from 2015.
You people have called you the real Tony Stark. SpaceX, Tesla, now you've got Solar City and the solar pack that people put in their houses. Are you sincerely trying to save the world?
I'm trying to do good things, yeah.
I would put all my money on this one. To me, The philosophy in his head is similar to my philosophy about the future, which is he thinks, hey, listen, humans are not really great at surviving in outer space, but this planet is eventually a liability. So how do we survive in an ongoing basis? Okay, well, let's see. AI, robotics, space travel. Okay. Because if we can like digitize ourselves and put ourselves into more survivable packages and send ourselves into space, then consciousness can survive long term. Totally. So I'm on the same page. But then what's funny is when he first came out of the gate, the package presentation was more about like global warming and, you know, driving electric and all these things to save the planet. So I do think the perspective was like, man, he's just trying to save humanity. I think that could be a nice side effect from his endeavors, but I feel like the motivation is originally, I won't call it evil either. It's just like this kind of pragmatic, where is the future headed? What do we have to, which bets do we have to place to try to hedge that future? Let's go. Rather than how do I save all of humanity? It's just a different thing. The outcome might be the same though, but.
Well, my takeaway from this clip is this reminds me how much everyone loved him not that long ago.
Yeah.
The fact that he's even on Stephen Colbert, the fact that Stephen Colbert is not just going after him, you know what I mean? And the audience is clapping and laughing. Colbert is writing the line a little bit. He's like, are you a villain? Are you a superhero?
Yeah.
Let's watch a little bit more of this.
Let's talk about the Tesla. I have a Tesla.
Yeah.
Okay, and I love it. I love it. You've got a new thing that you think is people are going to want for their Tesla. Jim, can we show the footage of this? I think it's called, this thing is the power arm.
For the prototype, at least, I would recommend not dropping anything when you're near it.
Thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's the funny clip for sure. I mean, it's interesting when you show some tech that is anything that looks organic but is robotic, it's already creepy, let alone when it's inserting itself into a hole.
Yeah, again, it just reminds me how different the vibe was around Elon Musk not that long ago.
Totally.
And still exists among many media folks or many people. But how quickly in the last year or two, he went from this seemingly universally loved, or at least
broadly loved,
liked, you know what I mean, to being a figure basically just a hair away from Donald Trump himself.
Yeah.
It's really interesting to me. And I want to, through all these chapters, try to answer the question, why the fuck would he do that to himself?
Right, yeah. You know, it's interesting. Yesterday I was talking with someone, and my daughter's 13 and has a friend who's 13. And I mentioned I was doing this deep dive. And the other kids started saying, oh, Elon Musk? Oh, he's... And I was fully expecting, like, he's so incredible. He's such a genius. Because that's what I was used to for all these years. And then, oh, he's an evil mastermind or something. You know, it was definitely the word evil was used. And I was like, oh, and I kind of inquired. And the answer about why was, well, because he wants to, it was all about like, he wants to turn us all into robots. Or it was something along those lines. So it wasn't like a political answer, but the perception of like, oh yeah, no, he's not this genius. He's an evil thing.
Yeah.
Like, oh, interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I see online in the last couple of years is universal hatred and universally wanting to see the beginning of his downfall. And we'll get into more of that later, but let's watch another clip. This is the Joe Rogan podcast.
Well, he's the next stage of humanity.
Yeah.
If people are evolving, he's like looking at us from the next spot. He's like, hey guys, I've got some ideas.
Yeah, I mean, he's just an idea factory, and what's really remarkable to me is the breadth of his knowledge. I mean, I've met a lot of super smart people, but they're usually super smart on one thing, and he's able to have conversations with our top engineers about the software and the most arcane aspects of that, and then he'll turn to our manufacturing engineers and have discussions about some really esoteric welding process for some crazy alloy, and he'll just go back and forth. And his ability to do that across all the different technologies that go into rockets and cars and everything else he does, that's what really impresses me.
I should mention that the YouTube channel Elon Musk Fan Zone, with over 1 million subscribers, took this clip from the Joe Rogan Experience podcast. I believe that Joe Rogan is interviewing one of Elon Musk's former close employees.
Yeah, I've heard this a lot from people that have worked with him, and I think it's a common perspective, which is, how does he do this? Like, he's got all these companies, he's the CEO for all of them, for a lot of them, and all of them in different technologies, and yet he seems to be an expert at all of them, right? I mean, obviously he's not, but he is smart enough and dynamic enough in his ability to morph into different conversations where he can, effectively do this. It's pretty interesting. But there were some interesting moments during the Twitter takeover where he was clearly overestimating his understanding about things. And I think it's the Dunning-Kruger thing where, like, I think anyone that is very smart, and he clearly is very smart, can learn enough quickly about a subject matter to then trick oneself into thinking like, oh, I really know a lot about this. And when that person happens to be the person in power with all the money, then even if they're wrong about many things, they're not going to get corrected easily. So I think it's a self-fulfilling thing. And then he has more and more conversations with more engineers, and they'll go like, well, I don't know, 20% of what he said is right. Wow, what a smart guy. So I don't actually think he is a world-class genius in all these technologies across the board, but he is good at appearing to be.
So I wonder if you could run an experiment, run back the clock, and you have Elon Musk make all the same business moves, but he has minimal conversations with the engineers, and whenever he's asked questions, he just pulls an engineer up and says, well, this person knows a lot more about that than I would, so you should talk to them. I wonder if the businesses would have been as successful. I think you would argue that they would be, because he's not contributing any ground level applicable suggestions or engineering knowledge. He's acting like he invented these things, which is arguable. People think that he will invent these things, but after consuming all of, and I of course have only seen a sliver of all the interviews and all of his statements, but he doesn't just flat out say, I invented these things. I think he probably likes being seen that way, right? Not only for his own ego, but also for his brand. He's sort of like Trump in that when you hear about, well, it's another Elon Musk company, and that is not only just good for PR and for your ego, but it's also good for investors,
That's right.
Like with Elizabeth Holmes, it's a lot of glitz and glamour in the beginning because you have to sell to the investors before you have a viable product, before you can make a viable product, and all startups and business people understand that. So I don't know. That's a question I have, is like, if we run the clock back, what would happen? Or now, certainly, if you just add up all the brain power and the practical knowledge and the experimenting and the material science and all the research that's gone into things, he's done 0.00001% of all that work for sure. But I also wonder if, given that he's in a role of leadership, not only is he hiring certain people or hiring people that hire people, which of course has an effect on things, but the way that he talks and the way that people talk about him, there's a chance that, like, I think about how with Boeing, how they're going through a lot of really rough times right now. And the simple analysis as to why Boeing is suffering is because in the beginning, all the leadership were engineers themselves. And then as Boeing merged with McDonnell Douglas, there was a takeover in terms of the leadership to move away from engineers who weren't as interested in stock prices,
right,
to your typical kinds of board members and CEOs that are just there to serve the stock, and everyone is just interested in making money, and they're not interested in making a good product. If they make a good product, fine, but it's just about stock prices. So what that results in is you have decades, over the last number of decades, of Boeing not investing in future technology and making the product as good as it can be, making sure quality assurance is high, because the leadership is like, well, is that going to make me money this year? And the answer would be no, it'll actually cost you money because there's more overhead. And then you get what you get, where planes are falling out of the sky and doors are flying off of planes and astronauts are stuck in capsules orbiting the Earth and might be there for months. And that's just the beginning of the problems at Boeing. So at Boeing, you have, all the engineers and all the quality assurance people and all the machinists and all the, the people that do the work. They go to the leadership and they get red tape and pushback, maybe even fired, because they're raising their hand at a meeting and saying, like, this is a problem. This could be a problem. You need to be investing in R&D for a whole new 737. We can't just be updating this plane all the time. This is decades old technology. We have bigger engines now. This could be a problem. You could literally be fired. Whereas if you have an Elon Musk at the top, this is just a question, I don't know, who understands the bigger picture, understands the engineering, and possibly is more interested in the product than his stock prices, which I don't know where that is for him. Maybe ultimately he's interested in that, but there are moves that he's made in his career that suggest that he truly is interested in the product. That you have someone at the top that is the opposite of those Boeing leaders who are like, look, if you're not interested in the future of this actually working and in the quality assurance, and you're just interested in the stock price, then you're fired. I don't know if that's what Elon Musk does, but that's a question that I don't know the answer to.
Right. My perspective is this. Like, your original question is, would they have been just as successful if it was all the same engineers and people, but just no Elon Musk? And possibly, let's take Tesla. Possibly not, because Musk does have some superpowers. First of all, a lot of people online that are his critics call him an idiot who is actually not smart. I don't think that that's true. I think this guy has to be very smart in order to operate as he does. That said, I just think his superpowers are different. No, I don't think he understands. I don't think he knows more about manufacturing than anyone else alive on Earth today. Which he said, I don't think that he is a neurobiology expert. I don't think any of those things. But what I do think he's got superpowers are, number one, to your point, if someone came to him and said, hey, we're stuck on this one thing because of red tape, he loves cutting through bullshit and red tape. And it's kind of his superpower. He's well known, his employees will attest to it, that it's like someone is like, oh, well, we're waiting on this one part from this one supplier. And then he'll go straight to that supplier. And if they say no, he'll go to some other country and find another supplier. Like, he is almost too impulsive to cut through tape, right? So that is a superpower, and that not everyone is like that. And I think that's super valuable. But two, I do actually think that if you think of all his investor calls for Tesla and his presentations on stage, it's all based on promising a value that is 100x what the current value is, so that investors will invest. And none of that is based on engineering knowledge. It's just inventing a future that doesn't exist and that is totally speculative, but selling it, right? And so I think it's a mix. I do think he cares about the stock price, but I also think he is very good at cutting through bullshit and red tape.
Yeah. Well, I want to say to the audience, I'm going to take a guess and say that the majority of you do not like Elon Musk. And through the various chapters of this deep dive, there will be ample opportunities to explore his deplorable behavior, I'll just say. So I'm worried that the audience is like, Kirk likes him. There are facts on the ground that point towards deplorable behavior. So in these clips, I think it's clear that, especially in the past, people loved him and saw him as a super genius, like a literal Tony Stark. More recently, it's the Joe Rogans of the world that will say that. Let's watch the rest of this video, actually, because I think it gets even more exaggeratory.
the lack of burnout, because he's been doing it at this incredible rate, 16 hours a day for how long?
His whole life, I think.
That's nuts.
I know.
And he's still hungry for it. And he's still taking on these new projects and new ideas. And it's just so weird to have a guy like that amongst us.
Yeah,
you know?
Especially have him as your boss. It was really weird.
Have you talked to him at all about simulation theory?
So there's more to this clip, but the way that Joe Rogan talks about Elon Musk is the way that a lot of people talk about him, which is either explicit or implicitly suggesting that he isn't really human, that that he's literally an alien, or that he is the next step in evolution, or he's a once in a billion years sort of variation on human genius or something. What do you think about that, bro?
Right. That definitely is. It's not an uncommon way to describe him, and certainly it used to be way more common. But I've also seen this about other industry leaders previously. For example, when Bill Gates, when Microsoft was really booming in the mid-90s, Bill Gates was described in similar ways. Now, granted, it wasn't across 20 different companies. It was one company. But the common thing was that he could have a meeting about any topic in the company and deep dive in, and identify the important part of that one topic, right? And so the idea is like, well, he must be a super genius, because how can he have in his head all the issues across the entire company of Microsoft, right? And again, Bill Gates, super smart guy. But it doesn't mean he actually knows every single line of code across all of Microsoft. It just means he's very good at identifying what's the important topic that you should talk about.
So just an asterisk, might it be a better way to put it that these figures are really good at doing their role within the org chart?
Yeah.
Like they're really good at that position, and the vice president of research is really good at their position, and the engineer, the lead engineer underneath that vice president is also really good at what they do, and they all work together as a team to be successful.
Totally. And look, to give credit to these people, including Musk, I mean, you do have to hire the right people, right? And if you don't hire the right people, because I can think of someone else that is always saying they hire the right people, and actually all their hires seem to be disastrous. But in this case...
Well, and most of them, according to research, currently are disavowing him.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Which is...
Okay. So that doesn't seem to be the case here. He seems to actually hire legitimately very good.
And an asterisk on this, is that if the lead engineer has some kind of flaw, that will lead to some consequences down the road. But if your Elon Musk's or your Bill Gates has a flaw, then that's going to be much more disastrous. There's much more weight to their pros and cons, or strengths or weaknesses. Right.
Yeah. So I guess what I'm getting at here is that I do believe Elon Musk is good at the similar types of things that some of these other industry leaders are, which are A, they do hire strong people. B, they're not afraid to fire and change. And the third one is what I was saying about if something is getting in their way, they have almost this kind of supreme narcissistic self-importance to say, I don't care. I'm going to move a mountain. We're going to do this anyways. Now, all of these have toxic sides to them, right? Like he does overwork his people. He apparently has horrific work conditions and some of the factors, blah, blah. So, and Steve Jobs had the same thing where it's like, oh my God, he would work us to death, literally, or almost literally. But that is to say, I think it's too simplistic to say, the guy's an idiot. He doesn't know anything. I just don't think that's feasible. Like, how can you... A lot of these people that get interviewed, they are legitimately smart engineers at their fields. And even the ones that say like, oh, it was a nightmare working for the guy, which they do, they won't say, and the guy's also stupid and has zero IQ. Like they'll never say that, right?
Right. Right. Not like certain politicians that will start talking about bleaching the inside of your...
Exactly.
So the final bullet point here, in the way that people see him, they see him as a successful business person, perhaps. I mean, is he arguably the most successful business person of all time? I mean, can you say that, given the entirety of his career?
I wouldn't say that, because most of his bets haven't paid off. But he has one bet that through mostly speculation has paid off more than anyone else's bets.
In Tesla.
In Tesla.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. What I would say, given my limited knowledge of the business landscape, is that he has made some bets that were ill-advised, and he worked his ass off, and they're working. SpaceX is, I think, the prime example of that. I mean, it was such a long shot to...
it still is, though. I mean, to be clear, they're not yet a profitable company.
Right.
Yeah.
But,
yeah.
I mean, there's such a difference between launching something like PayPal, which is just code on a server, and investing in decades of research and investment and, material science and test, to get humans or a roadster into space. Anyway, at the very least, a successful business person. Yeah. Also, people see him as a tyrannical bigot these days, getting to the turn in the last couple of years, especially since he bought Twitter. They say that he is using all of his power and wealth and money to make America great again, in quotes. They say that he's using Twitter to attack and oppress his political opponents and also underprivileged groups of people. They say he's a drug-addled, delusional narcissist who wants to rule the world. They're saying those things, and I think that there are arguments that those are accurate conceptualizations of him. So before moving forward, I want to say that I'm both excited and I am terrified about doing this deep dive, Berto.
Yeah.
When the patrons asked us to do this deep dive, I was eventually, as I looked into it and thought about it, I was excited because I wanted to comb through the data. I, as I said earlier, have absorbed the data passively over time. I'm not particularly in those circles of news to know much about him, but I wanted to have an excuse to just go through all the data, start going over some of the controversies like the Thailand cave kids thing and his relationship with Grimes, which I knew kind of about, his leadership style, the fraud scandals, sexual abuse, sexual harassment cases. And, because even just a casual dive into the news will only give you the surface information, and it takes a while to kind of go through it. Plus, if I'm trying to conceptualize this psychology, which is, pure speculation based on data on the internet, I need to have it all kind of in my head at the same time. And so I was excited, I wanted to just, I love diving into something and understand. I like understanding things, but I'm also terrified, Berto, because there's a number of reasons why I'm truly scared. Is that one, as I go into the data, I'm scared for our society, because the more I look into it, the more I realize just how much power he has, and just how problematic he seems to be in recent years. Some say has already ruined our society to some extent, and we're all doomed, So that's kind of scary. But the other fear I have is that there are clearly two groups of people when it comes to Elon Musk. And there's, as far as I can tell, literally no one in the middle, unless they don't know who he is, which is hard to imagine. But there are two groups of people. You either love him and worship him and are talking about him the way Joe Rogan is, where he's basically, in a messianic
superhero,
but also kind of messianic, because Joe Rogan, he's sort of pseudo-spiritual.
Yeah.
And the way he talks about Elon Musk, it's like, he said, it's just so amazing that he's among us. That's how they talk about him. And then on the other side, which is more my echo chamber, is just universal hatred of him. No nuance at all. He is universally a horrific, narcissistic, psychopathic, evil human being. And I am worried, like with the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial, that I can't win as a content provider, because if I side against him, then the cult members will attack me. If I say any praise of him, then most of our audience will hate me. And I'm worried. I'm genuinely worried. Ironically, he dated Amber Heard for a while, which we'll get to later. But should I be worried about that?
I am worried as well. I think he is a very, very dangerous entity, DMT entity in our world. I think that there are some hardcore factions that are aligned on his side that are generally worrying. One of the things he represents is the white male future, hyper intelligent, from the right descendancy, and in charge of things. And that is very valuable to some factions out there. And those factions are scary factions. So that's one thing. I also think that the extreme polarization in opinion is dangerous in and of itself. So the inability to have nuanced conversations about things and people is also a problem. So I share your concern there.
Yeah, and just an asterisk along those lines is that when we have polarized and non-nuanced points of view that aren't really reflective of the bigger picture, and especially when that point of view it necessitates attacking the other side, then it just further polarizes the population, and we get what we get in our society today in a lot of political views where you're either in the in group or you're in the out group, and that's that. And it lacks any kind of resolution to it. So to me, I want to be able to reach the fans of Elon Musk, because those people are going to be clicking on this too, and there's probably fans of ours that are fans of Elon Musk, and I want maybe them to hear what we're saying. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Also, I just think it's entirely possible for us as human beings to see a situation as it is, as objectively as possible, conclude that he has harmed others and that he is a danger to society, while also recognizing that he might be doing some good for society. It reminds me of when we talked about Bill Cosby, that if you understand his career, he did a lot to help black artists and actors and people in show business. That's undeniable. And he raped dozens of women.
Yeah.
So, and for people to say, well, he raped all those women, therefore all those things that he did that was good for black people in the entertainment industry, that's all negated.
Right.
And he must have just been doing it because he was trying to get away with raping all those women. He was just trying to, it was just a smokescreen or something. And, it's possible. It's also possible that he genuinely wanted to help black people in the entertainment industry. And I don't think it's that hard to hold on to those two things, but for some reason, it's really hard for people to hold on to those two things. I just hope that people can take a deep breath and
right.
As we go through, and like I said, I don't know where I'll land at the end of all this, but I'm worried about the audiences.
Like what if you use a more down-to-earth, recent-ish example? Bernie Madoff clearly defrauded a ton of people from a ton of money, right? But I know, because I watched a couple documentaries and things, I know that there were many people that spoke very highly of him before that, and to some extent still, like, because he had helped them, he had mentored them, he had all these kinds of things. So I could see some of them having mixed feelings, like, well, yeah, he really did defraud all these people for so much money and ruin many lives, but man, he also helped me.
Yeah, or Ashton Kutcher talking about his friend on the 70s show who assaulted those women, or at least one of them.
Yeah, exactly.
And how he will say, or at least before he was attacked by the public, he would say, Danny Masterson, I think he was one of the best friends I'd ever had.
Yeah.
And I recognized that he has assaulted these. At first I couldn't imagine, and I thought, there's no way that he did. He's one of the nicest people on the planet. Now I realize that he has done those things, and I'm struggling because I consider him to be one of the nicest people, one of my best friends. And the public would attack him because
right.
I can understand where someone, like, where you'd come from, you know what I mean? The other thing I'll say, Berto, is I cannot wait to get into this with you. Because you are the perfect person to talk with about this. I've been
exciting
going into this deep dive and all these notes just going, oh my God, I can't wait to and I honestly, because you and I don't talk about Elon Musk.
No.
And I didn't know what you were going to say, and I'm surprised thus far.
Yeah.
But you're the perfect person to talk to about this, because it's almost like your entire life has been geared to this moment, because your entire life, you know so much about the tech world.
Sure.
And about the business world. And you also know so much about the online world, the 4chans of the world, and all that kind of stuff.
It's all coming together.
My
life's dream.
You know so much about the AI world, and you know so much literally about AI. You and I had a similar, childhood with Elon.
Right.
There's certain things about you and I and him were programming in BASIC in the early 80s.
That's right.
Fantasizing about making video games and grand programs. We were the three of us were doing that.
Yes.
You know a shit ton about the business world, particularly the world of the West Coast tech venture capitalist stuff. You understand how these people think, and many other things that you understand.
And that's why I'm a billionaire too. Oh, damn it.
This is the Psychology in Seattle podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Kirk Honda. I'm a therapist and a professor, and this is the latest we've ever introduced the podcast to you, Humberto.
My name is Humberto Castañeda, and for the last 30 years, I've been working on these porta potties that will work in Venus, maybe also in Saturn.
I mean, you got to have those, right?
You got to have them.
So I'm going to end this episode with the outline of the entire deep dive. So I want to start in the next chapter going over the timeline. But as we're going through the timeline, there are some major events that can be analyzed regarding what it says about Elon Musk's psychology, but I'm going to put that off because I want to put all those into the same discussion, because I feel like if we stop in the timeline and go into that, it would really derail the situation. Plus, I imagine a lot of you listeners have a pretty limited knowledge, as I did when I started out, of Elon Musk's history, of his timeline. And there's a lot of interesting details there. And then after doing the timeline, going over the timeline, I want to have chapters that are dedicated to particular categories and events and adult behaviors related to those traumas. Like one of the first chapters after doing the timeline that I want to go into is his relationship with his father, which there's a lot to say. And there's a lot more to say more recently because more details have come out. And I also want to go into major events that are quite infamous at this point that I think are highly likely related to the traumas that he experienced with his father. That's a pretty big chunk of this deep dive right there. Then I want to have another set of chapters that are dedicated to the traumas that he experienced with his peers being bullied, which is reported on the surface level, but when you actually look at the entirety of the data, it's way more detailed and way more extensive than is often talked about. And I want to then talk about how that might explain a lot of his behavior in his adult life, particularly his more recent behavior on Twitter. I think there are viable conceptualizations that explain that, rather than just hand waving and saying that he's a psychopath. I think it usually is way more complicated than that. Or he's just crazy. People say, he's crazy these days. So what does that mean?
Yeah.
Also, there are some major questions that people have and I have. Did the incident of the kids being trapped in the cave in Thailand, what effect did that have on him? Because that seems to be a major turning point in his behavior and how he lives his life. I think even just how he thinks about himself. Also, exploring anti-Semitism. There's a whole chapter potentially on the topic of anti-Semitism and Elon Musk, because there's so many details there. Also, I want to talk about why he might be obsessed with getting to Mars in particular. Also, to a minor extent, I want to answer the question, is he a Nepo baby or is he a self-made man? Also, why does he have this quote-unquote demon mode? What are his ex-wives saying about him? What does his trans daughter say about him? And what does his daughter coming out as trans how did that affect him? Also, are the sexual harassment allegations credible? There are more and more coming out every day, or more recently. I want to talk about also, is he a genius, and what is genius? And what are the psychological constructs and personality traits that he might actually possess that might be helping him? And I want to talk about that not as a way to elevate him necessarily, but to highlight that there are constructs in psychology that are well understood and a lot of people possess, not just Elon Musk coming from another dimension. He's a regular variation of humans that we well understand, and they're all around us. It's just a trait or a spectrum that will go into that. I want to answer the question, why did he flip from being a moderate liberal to being super right wing? What happened there? How can he do that? And what does that say about him? I want to try to answer the question, is he in his heart really trying to benefit humanity? And in what way? Is he a narcissist? Is he a psychopath? Has ketamine addled his brain? And many, many more questions like that. The way that this deep dive is going to work is similar to more recent deep dives with Berto, in that we'll have 20 to 30 minutes that will be for the free portion, and then the rest of it will just be for patrons, because they're the ones that asked us to do this, and they're literally the ones that are funding our ability to do this sort of thing. If we didn't have the patrons, which is most of our revenue, our money, we would be having to work at other kinds of things.
There's no deep dives.
Yeah, and I just wouldn't have the time to do it. And the full patron episodes will be probably an hour and a half is typically. So I just wanted to get that out there. How's that sound, Berto?
That sounds like a lot and great.
Yeah. So that does it for that episode. Next chapter, we're going to start by reviewing a lot of the comments made by y'all on YouTube and on Patreon, what you think about Elon Musk. But until then, everyone out there, please take care of yourself, because
you deserve it.